Hi! Welcome to Actual Spinster. I haven't actually made a video in a really long time because I've just been like the kind of fatigued where you like you can't think like at all. Which is also why this video is like a while and yeah, but whatever. So basically last year I did a recommendation video for people where I asked them for their favourite colour and kind of based a recommendation about that. I also did ask for a recent book that they had liked because I thought without that it would be impossible. And this year I kind of wanted, or like last year when I was coming up with this, I wanted to like change it around a little bit. So I decided to go for fruit because I really like fruit. I don't eat that much of it because I struggle a lot with like texture, but I love fruit. Especially, I mean, obviously I have my favourites and my least favourites, but generally big fan, especially in comparison with vegetables. So I thought this would be fun. But yeah, like I said, I just haven't really had like any kind of cognitive capability to like actually think about this until the past few days basically. So that's why it's late, but yeah, here we go. So Phaedra, I think is how you would pronounce the username, said my favourite fruit is pomegranate. Last books I read recently and loved was The Apprenticeship by Clarice Lispector, and Minerva, The Miscarriage of the Brain by Joanna Hedver, which is a book that I really want to read. I'm a fan of modernist women written books with spiritual/philosophical leanings or anything that touches on the connection between disability and mysticism. Obviously pomegranate is a great fruit to choose, and as I was doing this process I kind of like came up with words for the fruit for myself to try to like help me figure out what I wanted to recommend. I think I have a couple for most people, unlike last time where I tried to kind of keep it to like one or two, but whatever, it's my video. One of these books I read more recently than the others, so also I don't have as strong a hold of what is in them, but I think that they have like the kind of vibe or energy that you're looking for. The first one I wanted to recommend was Woman Lovers, or The Third Woman by Natalie Clifford Barney. And yeah, I felt like this book is like so about like a kind of ecstatic pain pleasure, a kind of like bridging between people, like isolated and also deeply connected. And then I felt like when I read some of the synopsis for like the Clarice Lispector one, I thought it would kind of vibe with that. And then yeah, I also think like I think it's all through a kind of erotic particular and like lesbo-erotic kind of vibe, but I think it is kind of playing around with some philosophical ideas about being and loving and connecting and relating. Yeah, the next book isn't like a modernist book. That book was published in, well actually it wasn't published, but it was written in 1926 in French, so I don't know if you can read French, but there is an English translation by somebody called Chelsea, I think, which was released in like 2013, which is the one I read. But the next book is a much more recent like publication and like written book, and that's Virus by Linda Stoppard, which is about like art and patriarchy and like, I wouldn't want to say disability. I don't really remember it being about disability specifically, but definitely about like bodily non-normativity or kind of like bodily, yeah, bodies. I don't know, I think actually thinking more about it, it does have some similarities with Women Lovers for sure, and I think it has some like Joanna Hedver kind of energy too, but we'll see if you think that. And obviously bit of a cliche, but I kind of had to because it does definitely talk about like spiritual and kind of like philosophical stuff, even in quite like a simple way in a way, and that's Lolly Willows by Sylvia Townsend Warner. Like maybe you've already read it, but it is a modernist book too, so like yeah, I couldn't not recommend it. Fun story about that is that like I was talking with my rabbi about what I was doing my PhD proposal on, and this was before I started, so it was a slightly different one that I have now, and Sylvia Townsend Warner was part of it, so I told him about Sylvia Townsend Warner and he read Lolly Willows, and then the next time we spoke he like talked to me about it and was like, yeah, it was fun, but it was a weird book, which I just thought was so nice that he read it like that. It was so cute. I also just found a book, I think it was maybe released this year, so I haven't read it, but it's cool, and it's a non-fiction book, and it's called Women Writing Jewish Modernity 1919 to 1939 by Alison Schachter, and I really want to read that, and I thought maybe that would be interesting to you too, so I thought I'd include it kind of as like a bonus. Okay, so the next person is Ash, or Ash RT, sorry. I don't really know what to say people's names are anymore because now they're all changed to the ats, which I know can be different from somebody's actual like username, I guess, but like I don't know, whatever. So Ash says, my favourite is cherries, and my most recent favourite read was Wild Swans. I love non-fiction, but I'm open to anything that maybe I haven't heard of. I loved doing this last year, which is good. I'm glad you liked it. So non-fiction, difficult for me, but cherries are a great fruit. So I haven't actually read Wild Swans all the way through. Actually, most of the books that people said they had read recently and enjoyed I haven't read, but they did still help me kind of figure out the energy I was looking for. But I did read, I actually think what happened is I started reading Wild Swans like 3 times, so I read like the first chunk of it like 3 times, and then I never read longer, which obviously means I only got one of the women's stories, because it's about those, the like grandmother, mother, and then the daughter, their like journey whilst they experience like Chinese history changing rapidly and like intensely, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I don't know, I was like trying to think of something that might complement that, or like maybe had similar kind of strains of like maternal kinship, I guess. So I decided to go with Soviet Daughter, A Graphic Revolution, which obviously is very different because I mean it's a graphic novel and it's much shorter and like, yeah, but it's by Julia Alexeyeva, who is a Ukrainian writer and illustrator, and she moved to Chicago when she was young with her family, and basically it's about her, but it's actually more, or like the majority of the pages is spent on her great grandma Lola and her experience growing up in Soviet Ukraine and Russia and living through, you know, a lot of like intense. It starts from like 1910, which is when Lola was born, and it just goes throughout her life, and it's a pretty incredible life. Yeah, it's black and white, so obviously I know some people dislike that in their comics, but this one I thought worked really well, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, maybe that. I also kind of just want to recommend Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi, which is not a non-fiction book. It does have like grandmother, mother, daughter kind of tying the story together, and like, yeah, I just kind of want to recommend it. Like, I don't know that it really works. It is quite like a cherry book, I think, probably, you know, like full of like sweetness, but also like will stain you. Yeah, so there's 2, one more probable than the other. The next person is maybe Becky Candy, who says, my favourite fruit is probably bananas. A recent book I read and loved is The Manning Tree Witches by A.K. Blakemore, and I'd love a book that would get me out of a reading slump but is more character driven than plotty. I think I like bananas, but I think they're quite like a neutral fruit, so they didn't really help me that much in my decisions about this until I found a book that I think actually is maybe perfect for this. I realised that you posted this comment kind of a long time ago, so maybe you're out of a reading slump, but here we go. And the book is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, because it's very character driven, but it's also pretty sort of fast, because it takes 12 women and 1 non-binary person, I believe, and like kind of shows you snippets of their life, and they're in these like 3 chapter like pairings, groupings I guess I should say, where the first person is some way related to the next person is some way, you know, they're in like a tango kind of together, and they're all kind of connected really. And yeah, it's like pretty quick to read, and yeah, I think it might be good for a reading slump. I especially loved the first like chapter, and I think the last chapter probably too. Okay, Planet Hamlet 6690 says, favourite fruit, plums. Recent book I liked was Cliffs of Fool by Shirley Hazard. Looking for anything obscure, passionate, grotesque. So these like words are amazing, like obscure, passionate, grotesque, I love it. I'm not sure if I found you things that really fit with all 3, especially I guess obscure, but I might have, I don't know. I do think that reading one of the books I'm going to recommend, you should probably look up like content warnings, because it's just like, it's just full of violence, like from beginning to end. But I think it also fits quite well with like passionate, grotesque, and obscure, and that's Psycho-Nymph Exile by Porpentine Charity Heartscape, I believe, and it's a sci-fi book. I think it's like inspired by some kind of like very intense like erotic, grotesque manga type stuff, but it's a written novel, and it's about these like, I think they're kind of like pilot girls, and it's about like trans women and trans girls and stuff, and like love and PTSD and trauma and pain. And yeah, like I read it quite a long time ago, so I can't give you that much more. I'm only giving you like a vague plot description because that's all I can really remember, but I think, yeah, you might like it. Obviously you might hate it. I did definitely struggle with it, but I also found it very interesting, and I have thought about it quite a lot, especially in the first few months after having finished it. Another choice for you I thought was On Hell by Joanna Hedva, which is a pretty short book, and it's kind of about, again, I mean, I think it definitely has passionate, grotesque obscurity. And it's about care, and it's about blood, and it's about somebody who's been convicted of hacking into like some American security Pentagon stuff, I think, and it's kind of like his like monologue as he's kind of trying to like biohack his body. So it's also kind of about angels, and yeah, like it's very intense, but I don't think it's as intense as NYMPH EXILE, to be honest. But yeah, I definitely think that could work. The other novel I want to recommend is The Wooden Doctor by Margaret Evans, which is a kind of Villette retelling, but there is something very like Frozen Plumish about it, especially this particular time when it's really cold where she's staying. I think she's staying in France in this like French school. Yeah, it's about kind of like tortured womanhood, about illness, about like love, I guess. Yeah. So Jennifer Loves Books says, I'll say mango for favourite fruit, and Fingersmith by Sarah Waters as a recent reread. I enjoyed anything with some sort of mystery element is usually my kind of thing. So the thing with this is that I realised I don't really read like mystery books, and the couple that I thought I could recommend, I think that Jennifer, you've already read. So like I was going to recommend The Lie Tree, but I think I saw that you already read that. I also feel like kind of I feel like there's a contradiction between mangoes and mystery books, so I was trying to figure out how I can use the contradiction to like make a good recommendation, but I don't think I really necessarily succeeded. I did think that maybe Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, I have it, might work. I don't know, I feel like you might have read this though, in the sense that there is like something kind of like bright and sweet in the novel, but it is also this like mystery, and it has, you know, like a skin around it, I guess. But I don't know. That, I mean, it's a wonderful book, so you obviously, if you haven't read it, it's great. I think, you know, you might like it. I also thought maybe if I couldn't recommend The Lie Tree, I might pick an actual like murder mystery book, which I would maybe pick the Murder Most Unladylike series by Robin Stevens. Again, you might have read that though, which is set in the 1930s, and it's about these two girls at boarding school, Daisy and Hazel, solving crimes together, solving murders. Yeah, and it starts off like one of their teachers has been murdered. I did also put Nights at the Circus by Angela Carter, because it's not like super mysterious, although it is kind of a bit mysterious. It is also very like weird and kind of grotesque, and like also I think a lot of it doesn't hold up particularly well, especially in terms of like language used and the representation of characters of colour in it. But it is like an interesting book, and I guess one of the reasons I did is also because for me Sarah Waters is kind of like imitating Dickens in her work, and for me Angela Carter is a kind of Dickens, or like Dickensian. She has like a Dickensian voice that is like inflected by her like feminist kind of like psychedelic kind of vibe. I mean, maybe that's not quite it, but like I don't know if that makes sense, so that might be something to try. Yeah. Aptly named, Oranges 5249 says, would have to say lychee as my favourite fruit, which like I had forgotten all about lychees. I'm so glad you commented this. I used to love lychees as a kid, and like the prickly like skin that you like peeled off, love that. I've just finished reading Heaven by Mieko Kawakami and adored it. I would love any translated fiction recommendations you have, particularly anything translated from Japanese, but I love any books. So I think this is probably actually the request that I struggled the most with. I don't have any Japanese fiction to recommend, which is obviously something I need to remedy. And I also, when I was like looking up like the themes and kind of the vibe of Heaven, I couldn't get anything there either. So I thought I would go with a book that I want to read that is a Japanese book. Sorry if the frame has changed. Maybe we can, you know, like it will be a recommendation in a kind of forthcoming sense, I don't know. And that's A True Novel by Mine Mizumura, which is somewhat of a Wuthering Heights retelling, but is set in Japan in the 1960s. And it just seems really interesting. And I also kind of was like, well, that maybe works quite well. Obviously I haven't read the book itself, but obviously Wuthering Heights, I actually think it's quite like a lychee book. Like kind of difficult to deal with, ultimately worth it, prickly and like prone to like harming you a little bit and like just weirdly human, like fleshy in like a very somewhat bizarre eyeball-y kind of way. Like I feel like the parallels there. So maybe A True Novel will also kind of have that same kind of weird, depraved tastefulness. Yeah. Sorry. Apocalypse Reading says, most recent book I read and love was the aptly titled Bitter Orange Tree. Can't pick a fruit, but low-key obsessed with parsnips, which same, I love parsnips. So in terms of like parsnippy stuff, like I feel like, this is also maybe a bit boring for me to say, but I do feel like the Tiffany Aching series by Terry Pratchett has like some big parsnipness to it. And same with the Grampian novels, or at least the two I've read, The Weather House and The Quarrywood by Nan Shepherd. They definitely have like parsnip energy, this kind of like rooted dirt, and like Nan Shepherd obviously just wrote all the time with her eyes just like directly in the dirt, but was able to like see so much. So yeah, in terms of things that are similar to Bitter Orange Tree with like a parsnip inflection, I decided to go with The Translator by Layla Abu Layla. Maybe you have read this book before. I would really like to reread it, but I think it kind of matched some of the Bitter Orange Tree stuff that obviously I haven't read that either, but from hearing you talk about it and also from looking it up and stuff, because yeah, now I'm trying to remember details, but I think it's like set in a Glaswegian uni, and it follows this translator who's being asked to translate, is it like text written by like extremists for the university, and there's kind of like a love story, but it's also about her grief and her faith. Anyway, I think, yeah, I would definitely be interested if you feel like when you read it there's any kind of comparison there, but I don't know, I thought it was a really wonderful book, so if you do read it I hope you enjoy it. So per Storytime's Sean says blueberry or watermelon. Not sure what I'm looking for, I trust you, thank you. Last books enjoyed were Ven de la Vida's We Run the Tides and Pass with Care by Cooper Lee Bombardier. Blueberries wise, I would say this is one of the fruits that I really don't like. They're just like such a disappointment, because the outside is so beautiful, like the colours great, but then inside it's just like bleh. So I found this a little bit difficult. I guess I said that with every single one, because this was much harder than colours. Like colours was way easier. I'm going back to colours next year. Like, but I thought maybe The Essential Dykes to watch out for has obviously some of the same kind of like maybe like 90s queer culture vibes that Pass with Care probably does, and is in these like snippets and slices of like gay life, so that might be fun. I don't know if you've read that, you probably have. I also thought Zammy, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre Lorde might be good. Again, maybe you've read this. Especially there's like a bit where she has like a girl best friend, if I remember correctly, and like they have this like entangled relationship with each other, and it's really meaningful, but it's also kind of like ephemeral, I guess. And like, I don't know, Rerun the Tides, maybe there was like some similarities there. This is kind of just like last ditch attempt to recommend you something. And that's Marzen Mon Amour by Katja Oskamp, sorry, translated by Joe Heinrich, which is non-fiction, and it's kind of these like little vignettes of this it takes like one patient basically per each like thing. There is just one scene where there's like this woman who like commits suicide, but she's not a patient, she's just in the area, so it's kind of also about like the area where she has her like clinic session thing. But yeah, I don't know, I just feel like maybe you might like it, and in fact if you are interested, like I will send this to you, so like let me know. Sorry. Also, I know you said Bert likes lemons and limes, so I think a lemon and limey book would be like Fair Play by Tove Jansson, because it's like sharp, clean, immediate, plentiful, and kind of healing too, which I feel like is like lemon and limey kind of energy. But there we go. Okay, then Sage Reads says figs. Recently loved Pass with Care and looking always for weird trans fic. Figs are great. Figs are another one that like, they are great, but they also kind of like can easily shift into like bad textual territory for me. But I really respect figs, I guess. This is so funny. I obviously have such weird, intense feelings about fruit. Obviously, the first thing that comes to my mind in terms of like weird trans fic is Metabolize If Able by Playad. This great sci-fi novel set in a dystopia about like meds and care and clones and art and solidarity, and yeah, it's wonderful, and if you haven't read it, I definitely think you should, and I think it's like one of the books that you're definitely looking for. In terms of some other stuff, I actually thought maybe it's not, I wouldn't say that it's like a trans book or trans all the way through even, which is maybe kind of trans, but I think The Adventures of China Iron, yeah, that has some kind of interesting kind of like trans utopia kind of energy, but only in a part of it. And I mean, I also did find it really violent to read, and I struggled a lot with it. So yeah, I think if you want to pick that up, you should probably look at the content warnings too. And then in terms of some like retro sort of weird trans fiction, well, I kind of decided to go for some, like, again, like not trans but trans stuff. So The Faggots and Their Friends Between Revolutions. Yeah, this book from the 70s. It's really beautiful and lovely and fun. It has a lot of gender non-conforming stuff in it. And then also a play from the 1580s, and that's Galatea by John Lilly, where these like two girls, they dress up as boys, they fall in love with each other, blah blah blah. Like it's having a lot of gender in it. Yeah, I don't know, I just thought that maybe if you wanted some more retro stuff, or more than retro, I guess, from 500 years ago. Yeah, that's everybody's questions answered as badly as I did, but nobody said pears, which made me sad because I really like pears. So a book recommendation for a pear would be, not for a pear, but for somebody who likes pears, would be The True Heart by Sylvia Townsend Warner. I think that's a very peary book, like kind of a bit green and furry. And also nobody said strawberries, which also is appalling to me. So I think a strawberry recommendation is Maurice by E.M. Forster, like just it's a strawberry. That whole book is a strawberry. And then I also was like, oh, you know what is like an inverse strawberry, like a kind of sickly strawberry, or like exactly the opposite of what a strawberry is? Well, We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. That is a sickly or inverse strawberry. So if you really hate strawberries, maybe that would be a good recommendation for you. Okay, I think I need to stop talking now. Thank you for watching, and thanks for participating in this like weird book experiment recommendation blah. I really hope that like the stuff I recommended like works for you. Obviously let me know if it doesn't, because I would also be interested. I did really want to be eating like a bunch of fruit whilst I was doing this, but it's just too many spoons to do that. So I hope you're having a nice day when you watch this, and yeah, let me know, comment below about any of the books I mentioned. Just itch my nose there and you can definitely see. Yeah, anyway, I'll talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!